The silence in the Afghan mountains was deceptive. What seemed like peaceful wilderness was actually a death trap, with over 200 Taliban fighters closing in on a small team of Navy SEALs. The Americans had walked straight into an ambush, and now they were outnumbered 40-1. As bullets started flying from every direction, the team knew they had minutes before being completely overrun. But among them was someone the enemy never expected to encounter, a female operator whose skills would soon turn this impossible situation into the Taliban's worst nightmare. This is the true story of how one woman's deadly precision and unwavering courage saved an entire SEAL team from certain death, eliminating dozens of enemy fighters in what would become one of the most extraordinary combat operations in modern military history. The helicopter's rotors cut through the thin mountain air as Staff Sergeant Maria Santos checked her equipment one final time. At 28 years old, she had already earned a reputation as one of the most skilled snipers in the US military. Her dark eyes scanned the rugged terrain below through the aircraft's window, mentally mapping escape routes and potential firing positions. The other members of SEAL Team 6 sat quietly around her, their faces painted with camouflage and their weapons ready. The mission seemed straightforward on paper. Intelligence had indicated that a high-value Taliban commander named Abdul Rahman was hiding in a remote compound in the Kunar province of Afghanistan. Rahman was responsible for planning multiple attacks against coalition forces and had been on the military's most wanted list for over 2 years. The plan was simple: insert the team under cover of darkness, capture or eliminate the target, and extract before dawn. Team leader Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison briefed the group as they approached the landing zone. Morrison was a veteran of numerous operations, his weathered face telling stories of battles fought in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. He spoke in low, measured tones that commanded respect from every member of his team. "Intel says Raymond has between 15 and 20 fighters with him," Morrison explained, his voice barely audible over the helicopter's noise. "We land 2 clicks north of the compound and approach on foot. Santos, you'll take the overwatch position on the ridgeline while we move in. Williams and Foster will cover the back entrance. Thompson and I will take point." Maria nodded, adjusting the strap of her custom-built sniper rifle. The weapon was her most trusted companion, a precision instrument that had never failed her in over 50 confirmed kills. She had spent countless hours perfecting her craft, studying wind patterns, bullet trajectories, and human behavior. Her fellow soldiers often joked that she could hit a target from impossible distances, but Maria knew there was no magic involved, only years of relentless training and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Sergeant Mike Williams, the team's demolitions expert, sat across from her with his usual nervous energy. Despite being on dozens of missions together, Williams still got butterflies before operations. He constantly checked and rechecked his gear, a habit that had saved the team more than once when he spotted equipment failures before they became problems. Corporal David Foster was the team's communications specialist and the youngest member at just 23. His baby face often led enemies to underestimate him, a mistake that many had paid for with their lives. Foster possessed an almost supernatural ability to maintain radio contact even in the most challenging terrain, keeping the team connected to command and each other. Staff Sergeant Robert Thompson rounded out the team as their medic and secondary assault specialist. Thompson had seen more combat than most soldiers twice his age and carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had stared death in the face and walked away. His medical skills had saved numerous lives, both military and civilian, throughout his career. The helicopter began its descent toward the landing zone, a small clearing carved out of the dense forest that covered the mountainside. The pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Sarah Chen, was known throughout the special operations community for her ability to land aircraft in seemingly impossible locations. She had extracted teams from hot zones across the Middle East and had never lost a single soldier under her command. 2 minutes out, Chen announced over the intercom. "Weather's looking good, no wind to speak of, but intel reports increased enemy activity in the area over the past 48 hours. Stay sharp." Maria felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded every mission. It wasn't fear exactly, but rather a heightened state of awareness that sharpened her senses and focused her mind. She had learned long ago to embrace this feeling rather than fight it, using the energy to enhance her performance when lives hung in the balance. The team conducted final equipment checks as the helicopter descended. Each member carried specialized gear tailored to their role, from Morrison's assault rifle and night vision equipment to Thompson's comprehensive medical kit. Maria's loadout included her primary sniper rifle, a secondary weapon for close-quarters combat, and enough ammunition to engage multiple targets if necessary. Intelligence for the mission had come from multiple sources, including satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and reports from local informants. The compound where Rahman was believed to be hiding sat in a natural bowl surrounded by steep ridgelines, with only one main access road that wound up from the valley floor. The location was strategically chosen for its defensive advantages, making it nearly impossible to approach without being detected. However, the same geographic features that made the compound defensible also created opportunities for a skilled sniper. The ridgelines provided excellent overwatch positions, and the limited escape routes meant that targets would be funneled into predictable areas. Maria had studied the satellite photos extensively and had already identified 3 potential firing positions that would give her clear lines of sight to the compound. The helicopter touched down with barely a whisper, Chen's skilled piloting allowing for an almost silent insertion. The team moved quickly and efficiently, exiting the aircraft and establishing a defensive perimeter while Chen prepared for immediate departure. The plan called for the helicopter to return to a forward operating base and wait for the extraction call, which was expected within 4 to 6 hours. Morrison used hand signals to direct the team's movement as they melted into the forest. Years of training and operational experience had created an almost telepathic understanding between the team members. Each person knew their role and could anticipate the actions of their teammates without verbal communication. The terrain was challenging, with steep slopes covered in loose rock and dense vegetation that could easily betray their position if not navigated carefully. The team moved slowly and deliberately, testing each step before committing their full weight. Maria brought up the rear, her eyes constantly scanning the surrounding area for signs of enemy activity or potential threats. After 30 minutes of careful movement, they reached a position approximately 1 kilometer from the target compound. Morrison called a halt to reassess the situation and confirm their approach route. Using night vision equipment, they could see the dim glow of lights from the compound below, indicating that it was indeed occupied. Foster established communication with their command element, confirming their position and receiving updated intelligence. There had been no change in the situation since their insertion, and satellite imagery showed minimal movement around the compound. All indicators suggested that they remained undetected and could proceed with the original plan. Maria began her climb toward the overwatch position, moving even more carefully than before. The ridge line was approximately 200 meters above the compound, providing an ideal vantage point for covering the team's assault. The climb was treacherous in the darkness, with loose rocks and hidden crevices that could easily cause a fall. As she climbed, Maria's mind ran through the various scenarios they might encounter. The intelligence estimate of 15 to 20 fighters seemed reasonable based on the size of the compound, but she knew from experience that such estimates were often conservative. She prepared mentally for the possibility of facing larger numbers and planned her target prioritization accordingly. The rest of the team began their final approach to the compound, moving through a narrow ravine that would bring them to within 50 meters of the main building. Their movement was synchronized with Maria's ascent, ensuring that she would be in position to provide overwatch before they entered the danger area. Morrison's experience showed in every decision he made during the approach. He chose routes that provided maximum concealment while allowing for rapid movement if they were discovered. His team followed his lead with absolute trust, knowing that his tactical decisions had kept them alive through numerous previous operations. Williams carried the additional burden of breaching charges that would be used to create entry points if the doors proved to be reinforced. The weight of the explosive slowed his movement slightly, but his familiarity with the equipment allowed him to navigate the terrain without compromising the team's stealth. Foster maintained constant but minimal radio communication with both Maria and the command element, using subtle clicks and brief transmissions that were unlikely to be intercepted. His equipment was configured to frequency hop automatically, making it nearly impossible for enemy forces to track their communications. Thompson's medical training made him acutely aware of the risks they faced during the approach. He had treated numerous casualties from missions that had gone wrong in similar terrain, and he constantly evaluated potential evacuation routes and casualty collection points. As Maria neared her overwatch position, she began to notice subtle signs that all was not as it seemed. The compound showed more activity than the intelligence reports had suggested, with multiple figures moving between buildings. More concerning, she could see the faint outlines of fighting positions that had been dug into the hillsides surrounding the compound. The realization hit her like a physical blow. They were walking into a trap. The compound wasn't just a hiding place for Rahman and his immediate followers. It was a heavily fortified position, defended by a much larger force than anyone had anticipated. She needed to warn the team immediately, but first she had to reach a position where she could provide effective covering fire for their inevitable withdrawal. Maria pushed herself harder up the final stretch of the climb, her heart pounding from both exertion and the growing certainty that they were in serious danger. The rock seemed to move under her feet with each step, threatening to send her tumbling back down the mountainside. But she pressed on, driven by the knowledge that her teammates' lives depended on her reaching the Overwatch position. Behind her, Morrison's team continued their approach, unaware of the danger that awaited them. The next few minutes would determine whether they all made it home alive, or whether they would become another casualty statistic in the ongoing war against terrorism. Maria reached for her radio to warn them, but as she did, the first shots rang out in the darkness below. The muzzle flashes erupted from seemingly every direction as Morrison's team found themselves caught in the kill zone of a carefully planned ambush. What had appeared to be a routine capture mission had instantly transformed into a fight for survival against overwhelming odds. The intelligence had been catastrophically wrong. Instead of 15 to 20 fighters, the Taliban had positioned over 200 fighters throughout the valley. Morrison dove behind a large boulder as automatic weapons fire swept the area where he had been standing just seconds before. The distinctive crack of AK-47 rounds splitting the air overhead told him that multiple enemy positions were engaging simultaneously. His years of combat experience kicked in immediately as he began assessing their tactical situation and formulating a response. "Contact! Multiple enemy positions!" Morrison shouted into his radio, his voice cutting through the chaos of gunfire. "We're taking heavy fire from all directions. Santos, I need immediate suppressive fire on the compound." Williams had thrown himself into a shallow depression that provided minimal cover from the incoming rounds. Dirt and rock fragments showered down on him as bullets struck the ground around his position. He could see muzzle flashes coming from at least 6 different locations, indicating that they had walked into a much larger force than anyone had anticipated. "I count at least 30 fighters in the immediate area," Williams reported, his voice steady despite the desperate nature of their situation. "They've got us bracketed from 3 sides. We need to move now, or we're going to be completely surrounded." Foster was desperately trying to establish communication with their extraction helicopter while maintaining his position behind a fallen tree. Enemy rounds were striking the wood with sharp cracks, sending splinters flying in all directions. His radio equipment had been damaged by a near miss, but he was working frantically to repair the damage and call for immediate support. "Command, this is Viper Team," Foster transmitted on his backup radio. "We are in contact with a large enemy force, requesting immediate air support and emergency extraction. Multiple casualties possible." Thompson had already begun treating Williams, who had taken a grazing wound to his left arm during the initial ambush. The medic worked with practiced efficiency, even as bullets continued to fly overhead, applying pressure dressings and administering pain medication. His medical training had taught him to remain calm under pressure, but even he was shaken by the intensity of the enemy fire. "Williams is hit that's stable," Thompson reported to Morrison. "But we can't stay here much longer. They're moving to flank us from the north." High above the chaos, Maria had finally reached her Overwatch position and was horrified by what she saw below. The entire valley was alive with enemy fighters moving to surround her teammates. Through her rifle scope, she could count dozens of muzzle flashes and see the shadowy figures of Taliban fighters maneuvering to cut off any possible escape routes. Maria's training took over as she began engaging targets with methodical precision. Her first shot dropped a fighter who was attempting to set up a machine gun position that would have devastated Morrison's team. The second shot eliminated a Taliban commander who was directing fighters toward the team's position. "I'm engaging multiple targets," Maria reported over the radio, her voice calm and professional despite the desperate situation. "But there are too many of them. You need to move to the rally point immediately." The enemy had clearly spent days or even weeks preparing this ambush. Fighting positions had been carefully constructed to provide overlapping fields of fire, and the Taliban fighters demonstrated a level of tactical sophistication that surprised the American team. Someone with significant military training had planned this operation, and they had fallen for it completely. Morrison realized that their only chance of survival was to break contact immediately and move to a more defensible position. The original extraction point was now completely compromised, and they would need to fight their way to an alternate location while under constant enemy pressure. "We're moving to Rally Point Alpha," Morrison commanded. "Williams, can you move?" "I'm good to go," Williams responded, grimacing as Thompson finished bandaging his wound. "Just need someone to carry some of my gear." Foster had managed to repair his primary radio and was now in contact with both the extraction helicopter and the command element. The news was not encouraging. The nearest air support was at least 30 minutes away, and the extraction helicopter would not be able to reach them until the landing zone was secured. "Command says air support is en route," Foster reported, "but we're on our own for at least 30 minutes. The extraction bird is standing by, but they can't come in hot. Maria continued to engage targets from her overwatch position, her rifle barking repeatedly as she systematically eliminated enemy fighters. Her shooting was absolutely precise, with each shot carefully aimed to maximize the tactical advantage for her trapped teammates. But for every fighter she eliminated, 2 more seemed to take his place. "I'm seeing organized movement from the east," Maria reported. "Large group moving to cut off your route to Rally Point Alpha. You need to go now." Morrison made the decision that would save their lives. Instead of moving toward the predetermined rally point, he ordered the team to move directly up the mountainside toward Maria's position. It was a desperate gambit that would require them to climb nearly vertical terrain under enemy fire, but it was their only chance of avoiding complete encirclement. "Change of plans," Morrison announced. "We're coming to you, Santos. Guide us in, and keep those fighters off our backs." The team began their climbing retreat, moving from cover to cover as enemy fire pursued them up the mountainside. Williams struggled with his wounded arm, but Thompson and Foster helped him maintain the pace. The loose rock and steep terrain that had been challenging during their initial approach now became a nightmare as they tried to climb while under fire. Maria shifted her attention to the fighters who were pursuing her teammates up the mountain. Her elevated position gave her clear shots at the enemy forces, but she had to be careful not to hit her own people in the chaos. Years of training and experience allowed her to identify targets even in the darkness and confusion of the firefight. "Keep moving up and to your left," Maria directed over the radio. "I can see a group of fighters trying to get ahead of you. I'm taking them out now." Her rifle spoke again and again, each shot carefully placed to maximum effect. The Taliban fighters began to realize that they were being engaged by a highly skilled sniper, and some began to seek cover rather than pursue the American team aggressively. But there were simply too many of them, and they continued to press forward despite their casualties. Morrison's team was making steady progress up the mountainside, but they were running low on ammunition, and Thompson was concerned about Williams' condition. The medic could see that his patient was weakening from blood loss and the physical exertion of the climb, but there was no time to stop for proper treatment. "Williams needs medical attention," Thompson reported to Morrison. "He's losing too much blood, and this climb is taking everything out of him." "Just keep him moving," Morrison replied grimly. "We'll get him proper treatment when we reach Santos's position." Foster was monitoring enemy radio traffic and reporting what he heard to the team. The Taliban fighters were coordinating their movements and calling for reinforcements from other areas. What had started as a large ambush was rapidly escalating into a major engagement that could draw hundreds of additional enemy fighters to their location. "They're calling in fighters from at least 3 other compounds," Foster reported. "Intel estimates are completely wrong. This is a major staging area, not just a hideout." Maria could see the enemy reinforcements beginning to arrive from multiple directions. Vehicles were moving along the valley roads, and she could count dozens of new muzzle flashes as fresh fighters joined the battle. The situation was deteriorating rapidly, and she knew that her team had very little time before they would be completely overwhelmed. "I count at least 50 new fighters moving into position," Maria reported. "They're bringing up heavy weapons. I can see at least 2 machine gun teams and what looks like an RPG launcher." The team was now halfway up the mountainside, but their progress had slowed considerably as fatigue and Williams' injury took their toll. Enemy fire was becoming more accurate as the Taliban fighters adjusted to their movement patterns, and Morrison knew they needed to reach Maria's position quickly or risk being pinned down in an untenable position. "How much further to your position?" Morrison asked Maria over the radio. "About 200 meters," she replied. "But the terrain gets worse from here. You're going to need to move through a narrow ravine that will channel you right into their line of fire." Morrison studied the terrain ahead through his night vision equipment and could see the ravine that Maria was describing. It was their only route to her position, but moving through it would expose them to concentrated enemy fire from multiple directions. It was a calculated risk that might cost them everything. "We don't have a choice," Morrison decided. "Santos, I need you to suppress those positions on both sides of the ravine. We're coming through whether they like it or not." Maria adjusted her position to get the best possible field of fire into the ravine area. She could see enemy fighters positioning themselves to ambush Morrison's team as they moved through the narrow passage. Her next few shots would be critical in keeping her teammates alive during their most vulnerable moment. "Ready when you are," Maria reported. "I've got targets identified on both sides. Move fast and don't stop for anything." Morrison looked at his exhausted team. and knew that this would be their final push. If they could reach Maria's position, they might have a chance to establish a defensive perimeter and hold out until air support arrived. If they failed, none of them would see the sunrise. "This is it," Morrison told his team. "Stay low, move fast, and trust Santos to keep us alive." Maria Santos had never faced a target-rich environment like this in her entire military career. Through her scope, she could see Taliban fighters positioning themselves on both sides of the ravine her teammates would have to traverse. The enemy had recognized the natural choke point and were preparing to turn it into a killing field. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated what a single skilled sniper could accomplish in the right position. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, Maria began the most important shooting sequence of her life. Her first target was a Taliban fighter attempting to set up a PKM machine gun on the eastern ridge. The heavy weapon would have devastated Morrison's team as they moved through the ravine. Maria's bullet struck the gunner's center mass, sending him tumbling backward into the rocks. Before the other fighters could react, Maria had already shifted to her next target, another machine gunner on the western side of the ravine. Her second shot was equally precise, eliminating the threat before the weapon could be brought into action. The remaining Taliban fighters began to realize they were being engaged by an extremely skilled marksman, but they couldn't determine her exact position in the darkness. "Beginning suppression fire," Maria reported into her radio, her voice completely calm despite the chaos erupting around her. "Move now while they're confused." Morrison's team burst from their covered position and began sprinting through the ravine. Williams was running on pure adrenaline despite his wound, supported by Thompson, who refused to let his patient fall behind. Foster maintained communication with both Maria and the command element while moving, updating everyone on their tactical situation. Maria's rifle continued its deadly work as she engaged target after target with mechanical precision. A Taliban fighter with an RPG launcher became her third victim as he attempted to line up a shot at the running Americans. The grenade launcher clattered down the mountainside as its operator collapsed. Enemy fighters began firing wildly in Maria's direction, but their shots were poorly aimed and ineffective. They were shooting at muzzle flashes rather than acquiring proper sight pictures, a common mistake made by fighters under stress. Maria had chosen her position carefully to minimize her signature while maximizing her field of fire, and the enemy's undisciplined response played directly into her tactical advantage. "Keep moving!" Maria shouted over the radio as she engaged two more targets. "You're almost through the worst of it." Foster stumbled on the loose rock but quickly recovered, his communication equipment rattling as he regained his footing. The radio traffic he was monitoring indicated that the Taliban commanders were becoming increasingly frustrated with their inability to stop the escaping Americans. They were calling for more fighters and heavier weapons, but the coordination was breaking down under the pressure of Maria's devastating sniper fire. Thompson was pushing Williams harder than he would normally recommend for a wounded patient, but their survival depended on reaching Maria's position quickly. The medic could see that Williams was running on reserves that wouldn't last much longer, and they needed to find a defensible position where he could provide proper medical treatment. Morrison led from the front, using his night vision equipment to identify the safest route through the treacherous terrain. His combat experience showed in every decision he made, choosing paths that provided maximum concealment while allowing for rapid movement. Behind him, his team followed with absolute trust in his leadership. Maria had now eliminated 8 enemy fighters in less than 3 minutes of shooting. Each shot had been carefully aimed and precisely executed, demonstrating the years of training and natural talent that had made her one of the most feared snipers in the American military. But she knew that her ammunition was limited, and she needed to make every shot count. A new group of Taliban fighters appeared on the ridgeline, attempting to flank the position where they believed Maria was located. They moved tactically, using fire and maneuver techniques that suggested better training than the average insurgent fighter. Maria recognized the threat and began engaging them before they could get into position. Her 9th and 10th shots dropped 2 of the flanking fighters, causing the others to seek cover behind a large boulder. Maria waited patiently for one of them to expose himself, her crosshairs steady on the edge of their cover. When a fighter finally leaned out to acquire a target, Maria's 11th shot ended his involvement in the battle permanently. 30 meters to go, Morrison called out to his team as they approached the final stretch to Maria's position. "Santos, we're almost to you." "I can see you," Maria replied, tracking their movement through her scope. "There's a group of fighters moving to intercept you from the north. I'm engaging them now." Maria shifted her attention to the new threat, identifying 4 Taliban fighters who were attempting to cut off her teammates' route. They were moving aggressively, probably confident that they could overwhelm the small American force through sheer numbers. Maria's 12th shot dropped the lead fighter, causing the others to hesitate momentarily. That moment of hesitation was all Maria needed to eliminate 2 more targets with rapid follow-up shots. The surviving fighter dove for cover, but he had exposed his position to Maria's overwatch. Her 15th shot silenced his weapon permanently, clearing the final obstacle between her teammates and safety. Morrison's team reached Maria's position exhausted but alive, diving into the defensive perimeter she had established among the rocky outcropping. Williams collapsed immediately, his strength finally giving out after the harrowing climb under fire. Thompson began working on him frantically, establishing an IV line and checking his vital signs. "How are we looking?" Morrison asked Maria as he caught his breath from the climb. "We've got problems," Maria replied grimly, never taking her eye from her rifle scope. "I count at least 100 fighters still moving to surround us. They're bringing up mortars and heavy machine guns. We need air support immediately." Foster was working his radio frantically, trying to coordinate with the incoming air support while updating the command element on their situation. The extraction helicopter was standing by at a safe distance, but the pilot refused to approach the landing zone while it remained under heavy fire. "Air support is 10 minutes out," Foster reported. "2 A-10 Thunderbolts with full loads, but the extraction bird won't come in until we can secure a landing zone." Maria continued to engage targets as the Taliban fighters attempted to close the distance to their position. Her shooting had become a deadly rhythm. Identify a target, acquire sight, picture, fire, shift to next target. Each shot was calculated to maximum tactical effect, either eliminating immediate threats or disrupting enemy movement patterns. Thompson had stabilized Williams' condition, but the wounded soldier needed immediate evacuation to a proper medical facility. The climb and continued stress had worsened his injury, and Thompson was concerned about infection setting in if they remained in the field much longer.
"Williams needs a hospital," Thompson reported to Morrison.
"I've done everything I can here, but he's not getting better in these conditions." Morrison studied their tactical situation through his night vision equipment. They were surrounded by a numerically superior force that was growing stronger by the hour. Their ammunition was running low, and they had 1 wounded team member who needed immediate medical attention. But they also had the best offensive position available, and Maria's sniper fire was keeping the enemy at bay. "We hold here until air support arrives," Morrison decided. "Santos, how much ammunition do you have left?" 20 rounds, Maria replied, taking another carefully aimed shot at a Taliban fighter who was attempting to set up a mortar position. "I'm making them count, but we're going to need those Thunderbolts soon." The enemy fire was becoming more organized as Taliban commanders regained control of their forces and developed new tactics to deal with Maria's sniper fire. They began using smoke grenades to obscure her vision and coordinating simultaneous attacks from multiple directions to overwhelm her ability to engage all threats. Maria adapted her tactics accordingly, focusing on the most dangerous targets while allowing lesser threats to approach closer than she would normally prefer. Her experience told her that the enemy would eventually mass for a final assault, and she needed to conserve ammunition for that critical moment. "They're massing for a big push," Maria observed, watching through her scope as dozens of fighters gathered in the dead ground below their position. "I can see at least 40 fighters getting ready to charge our position." Foster received an update from the air support elements and relayed the information to the team. The A-10 aircraft were approaching their position and would be ready to engage targets within minutes. But they needed someone to provide target designation for the airstrikes, and that responsibility would fall to Maria. "Thunderbolt Flight is requesting target designation," Foster reported. "They want you to mark the largest enemy concentrations for airstrikes." Maria switched to her laser designator and began identifying the most lucrative targets for the incoming aircraft. The concentration of enemy fighters below their position would be perfect for the A-10's devastating 30mm cannon, but she needed to ensure that her own team remained clear of the danger area. "Tell Thunderbolt that I'm marking a large group of fighters approximately 300 meters southeast of our position," Maria directed. "At least 40 targets in the open." Danger close authorization approved. The sound of approaching aircraft engines echoed across the valley as the A-10 Thunderbolts made their attack runs. Maria had done everything possible to keep her team alive, but now their survival depended on the precision of the Air Force pilots and the devastating firepower of their aircraft. Williams stirred consciousness as the aircraft approached, looking up at Thompson with confusion. "Did we get him?" he asked weakly, referring to their original target. "We're working on it," Thompson replied with a grim smile. checking his patient's bandages one more time before the airstrikes began. The distinctive sound of the A-10 Thunderbolt's engines filled the valley as the two aircraft approached the target area. Captain Lisa Rodriguez, the lead pilot, had been briefed on the desperate situation facing the SEAL team, and understood that American lives hung in the balance of her next few minutes of flying. Her aircraft was loaded with a full complement of 30 mm ammunition and precision-guided munitions, enough firepower to devastate the Taliban forces if properly applied. Thunderbolt 1-1, this is Viper Team.
Foster transmitted from their defensive position.
We have danger close targets marked by laser designation. Approximately 40 enemy fighters massed for assault on our position. Captain Rodriguez could see Maria's laser designation illuminating the target area through her targeting systems. The concentration of enemy fighters was exactly as described. A large group of Taliban fighters preparing for what appeared to be a final assault on the Americans' position. She began her attack run, lining up for maximum effect with her devastating 30 mm GAU 8 cannon. Maria watched through her scope as the lead A-10 rolled into its attack run. She had called in airstrikes before, but never in such a desperate situation, with her own team so close to the target area. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. The aircraft would need to deliver their ordnance with surgical precision to avoid hitting friendly forces. Gun run inbound, Captain Rodriguez announced over the radio. All friendly forces take cover immediately. The team pressed themselves into whatever cover they could find among the rocky outcropping as the A-10 began its attack. The sound of the GAU 8 cannon was unmistakable. A deep, tearing roar that sounded like the world's largest chainsaw. The 30 mm depleted uranium rounds tore through the Taliban fighters with devastating effect, eliminating dozens of targets in a matter of seconds. Maria watched in fascination as the area where the enemy fighters had been massing erupted in dust and debris. Bodies were thrown in all directions as the massive rounds found their targets. The psychological effect on the surviving Taliban fighters was immediate and profound. Many began retreating from the area despite orders from their commanders. Thunderbolt 1-1, excellent work, Foster transmitted. Target destroyed. We're seeing enemy forces withdrawing from multiple positions. But Captain Rodriguez wasn't finished with her attack run. She had observed additional enemy positions during her approach and was already lining up for a second pass. The Taliban fighters who had been manning fighting positions around the valley were now exposed and vulnerable to air attack. Thunderbolt 1-2, follow my lead. Captain Rodriguez directed her wingman. I'm seeing multiple enemy positions on the ridgelines. Let's clean them up. The second A-10 rolled in for its attack run, targeting the fighting positions that Maria had identified earlier in the engagement. The pilot, Major Robert Kim, had flown countless close air support missions and understood the critical importance of eliminating every possible threat to the ground forces below. Maria used the opportunity provided by the airstrikes to engage additional targets with her sniper rifle. Several Taliban fighters who had survived the initial air attack were attempting to reorganize and continue their assault. Her methodical shooting eliminated key leaders and weapon operators, further disrupting the enemy's ability to mount an effective attack. Thompson was monitoring Williams' condition closely during the airstrikes, concerned that the concussion from the nearby explosions might worsen his patient's injuries. Williams remained conscious but weak, and Thompson knew that they needed to get him to proper medical facilities as soon as possible. "How's he doing?" Morrison asked Thompson during a brief lull in the action. "Stable for now," Thompson replied. "But we need to get him evacuated soon. The longer we stay out here, the higher the risk of complications." Foster was coordinating with the extraction helicopter, which was now preparing to attempt a landing in their area. The pilot, Chief Warrant Officer Chen, was reluctant to approach while enemy forces remained active in the area, but she understood the urgency of Williams' medical situation. "Extraction bird is inbound," Foster reported. "ETA 5 minutes. But they need us to secure the landing zone before they'll commit to coming in." Maria shifted her attention to the proposed landing zone, scanning for any remaining enemy threats. Through her scope, she could see several Taliban fighters who had taken cover behind rocks and vegetation, waiting for an opportunity to engage the helicopter during its most vulnerable moment, landing and takeoff. "I've got eyes on at least 6 fighters near the landing zone," Maria reported. "They're well concealed, but I can take them out before the bird arrives." Morrison made the tactical decision to clear the landing zone using a combination of Maria's sniper fire and a coordinated movement by his team. It was risky to leave their defensive position, but Williams's medical condition left them no choice but to attempt the extraction. "Santos, start engaging targets around the landing zone," Morrison ordered. "We're going to move down and secure the area for extraction." Maria began systematically eliminating the threats around the landing zone, her rifle speaking with deadly accuracy as she picked off concealed enemy fighters. Her shooting had become almost mechanical in its precision: identified target, acquire sight picture, fire, move to next target. Each shot was placed with surgical accuracy, eliminating threats before they could engage the incoming helicopter. Morrison's team began their movement toward the landing zone, with Thompson helping Williams navigate the treacherous terrain. Foster maintained communication with both the extraction helicopter and the A-10s, which were continuing to provide overwatch for the operation. The first Taliban fighter that Maria engaged around the landing zone never knew what hit him. Her bullet found its mark from over 400 meters away, dropping him instantly behind the boulder where he had taken cover. The second fighter, alerted by his companion's death, attempted to change positions but exposed himself to Maria's scope in the process. Maria's ammunition was running critically low, but her shooting remained as precise as ever. She had eliminated over 30 enemy fighters during the course of the engagement, a remarkable achievement under any circumstances, but extraordinary given the pressure and duration of the firefight. Landing zone is almost clear, Maria reported as she engaged her final targets. 2 more fighters on the eastern edge, then you should be good to go. Captain Rodriguez was monitoring the extraction operation from her aircraft, ready to provide immediate fire support if the Taliban forces attempted to interfere with the helicopter landing. Her wingman was positioned to cover a different sector, ensuring that they had overlapping fields of fire to protect the vulnerable extraction bird. Chief Warrant Officer Chen brought her helicopter in low and fast, using the terrain to mask her approach from any surviving enemy forces. Her crew chief and door gunner had their weapons ready to engage any threats that appeared during the landing sequence. Maria's final 2 shots eliminated the last enemy fighters in the immediate area of the landing zone. She had expended almost all of her ammunition, but her marksmanship had cleared the way for a successful extraction. The landing zone was now secure enough for the helicopter to attempt its pickup. Landing zone is clear, Maria announced. All identified threats eliminated. Morrison's team reached the landing zone just as the helicopter touched down, its rotors kicking up a cloud of dust and debris that provided additional concealment from any distant enemy observers. Thompson helped Williams into the aircraft while Foster gathered their sensitive equipment and ensured that nothing was left behind. Maria began her own movement toward the landing zone, carefully climbing down from her overwatch position while maintaining observation of the surrounding area. She knew that Taliban reinforcements could arrive at any moment, and the team needed to extract immediately before they found themselves facing fresh enemy forces. The helicopter crew worked with practiced efficiency to load the team and their equipment. Williams was secured on a stretcher, where the crew chief could monitor his condition during the flight to the medical facility. The other team members took positions where they could provide security during takeoff. "Everyone's loaded," Foster reported to Chen. "We're ready to go." Chen immediately began her takeoff sequence, pulling the helicopter up and away from the landing zone as quickly as possible. The A-10s provided cover during the most vulnerable phase of the extraction, ready to engage any enemy forces that might threaten the departing aircraft. As they climbed away from the valley, Maria looked down at the battlefield where she had made her stand. The area was littered with the bodies of Taliban fighters who had underestimated the deadly precision of an American sniper. Her accurate shooting had turned what could have been a massacre into a tactical victory for the SEAL team. Morrison keyed his radio to thank the air support elements who had saved their lives. "Thunderbolt Flight, this is Viper Team. Thanks for the save. Your timing was perfect. Happy to help." Captain Rodriguez replied, "Good hunting down there, Viper Team." The helicopter carried the team toward safety, but Maria knew that their original mission remained incomplete. The high-value target they had come to capture was still at large, and the intelligence failure that had nearly cost their lives needed to be investigated and corrected. The medical facility at Forward Operating Base Chapman buzzed with activity as Williams was rushed into surgery. The military surgeons worked quickly to repair the damage from his wound and address the complications that had developed during the extended firefight. Maria sat in the waiting area, her rifle finally silent after the most intense combat engagement of her career. Colonel James Mitchell, the base commander, personally debriefed the team in a secure conference room. The intelligence failure that had nearly cost 5 American lives demanded immediate investigation and explanation. Mitchell was a veteran infantry officer who understood the critical importance of accurate intelligence in special operations. "The preliminary assessment is that our intelligence was compromised," Colonel Mitchell explained to the assembled team. "Someone fed us false information about the target location and force strength. We're investigating whether this was intentional deception or simply bad intelligence gathering." Morrison provided a detailed account of the mission from insertion to extraction, emphasizing the critical role that Maria's marksmanship had played in their survival. His after-action report would become a case study in small unit tactics and the importance of superior marksmanship in asymmetric warfare. Without Santos providing overwatch and suppressive fire, we never would have made it out, Morrison stated firmly. Her shooting kept us alive when we were outnumbered 40-1. I've never seen marksmanship like that under combat conditions. Foster had been working with the intelligence analysts to piece together what had gone wrong with their mission planning. The intercepted communications and satellite imagery that had formed the basis for their intelligence assessment were being re-examined in light of what they had actually encountered in the valley. The compound was being used as a regional headquarters, Foster explained. We weren't walking into a hideout, we were attacking a major Taliban command and control facility. The intelligence picture was completely wrong from the beginning. Thompson emerged from the operating room with positive news about William's condition. The surgery had been successful, and the wounded SEAL was expected to make a full recovery. The quick medical attention and evacuation had prevented any serious complications from developing. Williams is going to be fine, Thompson reported to the team. Clean wound, no permanent damage. He should be back to full duty in 6 to 8 weeks. But even as the team recovered from their harrowing experience, new intelligence was developing about their original target. Abdul Rahman had indeed been in the valley during their mission, but he had escaped during the confusion of the firefight. However, the Taliban losses had been so severe that Rahman's operational capabilities were significantly degraded. Maria had been reviewing her shooting performance with the base's master sniper instructor, Staff Sergeant David Chen. Her accuracy and target selection during the engagement had been nearly flawless, but she was always looking for ways to improve her already exceptional skills. 37 confirmed kills in a single engagement, Chen observed, reviewing Maria's shooting log. That's remarkable marksmanship under any conditions, but especially impressive considering the stress and duration of the firefight. The Taliban forces had suffered devastating casualties during the engagement, with over 100 fighters killed or wounded. The combination of Maria's precision shooting and the devastating airstrikes had essentially destroyed an entire Taliban battalion that had taken months to assemble and train. Intelligence reports indicated that the Taliban leadership was conducting their own investigation into how such a small American force had inflicted such massive casualties. Several mid-level commanders had been executed for their failure to eliminate the SEAL team, creating additional disruption within the enemy organization. 3 days after the mission, new intelligence revealed Rahman's location at a different compound in the same general area. This time, the intelligence was thoroughly vetted and confirmed through multiple sources. Colonel Mitchell authorized a follow-up mission with significantly more resources and better preparation. Maria volunteered for the new mission despite having just survived the most intense combat of her career. Her teammates were equally determined to complete their original objective and eliminate the high-value target who had cost them so much blood and effort. Rahman made this personal when he set that trap, Morrison told Colonel Mitchell during the mission planning session. We want another shot at him. The second mission was planned with meticulous attention to detail, incorporating the lessons learned from their first encounter. Multiple sniper teams would provide overwatch, air support would be immediately available, and a quick reaction force would be standing by to provide reinforcement if needed. Maria spent hours studying the terrain around Rahman's new location, identifying optimal firing positions and escape routes. She understood that the Taliban would be expecting another attempt and would have prepared their defenses accordingly. But she also knew that her proven ability to eliminate large numbers of enemy fighters gave the team a significant tactical advantage. Williams insisted on participating in the mission despite his recent surgery, but Thompson and Morrison overruled his request. The wounded SEAL would remain at the base to coordinate intelligence and communication support for the operation. I should be out there with you, Williams protested from his hospital bed. This is our mission. You've done your part, Morrison replied firmly. Now let us finish what we started. The new mission launched 48 hours after Williams' surgery, with Maria once again taking the critical overwatch position. This time, however, she was supported by 2 additional sniper teams and immediate air support. The Taliban would not catch them unprepared again. The approach to Rahman's new compound proceeded without incident, with the team maintaining strict noise and light discipline throughout their movement. Intelligence indicated that the Taliban had reduced their security presence after their massive losses in the previous engagement, but the Americans took no chances with their tactical preparations. Maria established her overwatch position on a ridgeline that provided excellent observation of the target compound. Through her scope, she could see several enemy fighters moving between buildings. but the numbers were much smaller than they had encountered during their first mission. The assault team moved into position without being detected, using the skills and experience that had kept them alive during their previous encounter. Morrison's tactical leadership was flawless, positioning his team for maximum effectiveness while minimizing their exposure to enemy fire. When the mission commenced, it proceeded exactly as planned. The assault team breached the compound while Maria provided overwatch from her elevated position. The Taliban fighters were quickly overwhelmed by the superior tactics and firepower of the SEAL team, and resistance collapsed within minutes. Abdul Rahman was captured alive in a hidden room beneath the main building, ending his career as a Taliban commander and removing a significant threat to coalition forces. The high-value target who had cost them so much effort was finally in American custody. "Target secured," Morrison reported over the radio. "Rahman is in custody and ready for extraction." The extraction proceeded smoothly, with Maria providing rearguard security as the team withdrew from the compound with their prisoner. The Taliban response was minimal, suggesting that their local forces had been effectively destroyed during the previous engagement. As their helicopter carried them back to base with Rahman in custody, Maria reflected on the mission that had nearly cost them everything. Her marksmanship had been tested under the most extreme conditions possible, and she had proven that superior training and skill could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Williams was waiting for them when they returned to base, his arm in a sling, but his smile unmistakable. The mission that had begun as a simple capture operation had become an epic test of survival and skill, but it was finally complete. "Outstanding work," Colonel Mitchell told the team during their post-mission briefing. "This operation will be studied in military schools for years to come. You've shown what American warriors can accomplish when faced with overwhelming odds." Maria's performance during the mission earned her the Silver Star for gallantry in action, but she knew that the real reward was bringing her teammates home alive. The Taliban fighters who had surrounded them in that valley had learned a hard lesson about underestimating American determination and skill. Rahman's capture provided valuable intelligence about Taliban operations throughout the region, leading to numerous follow-up operations that significantly degraded enemy capabilities. The mission that had nearly ended in disaster ultimately became one of the most successful counter-terrorism operations of the war. Maria continued to serve with distinction in numerous subsequent missions, but none would match the intensity and stakes of that night in the Afghan mountains, when her rifle spoke with deadly precision against overwhelming odds. She had proven that sometimes one person with the right skills and unwavering courage could change the entire course of a battle. The story of how a female sniper eliminated dozens of enemy fighters to save her surrounded teammates became legendary within the special operations community, inspiring countless other warriors to push beyond their perceived limitations when American lives hung in the balance.